Administrator Regan and colleagues, constituents, welcome to this appropriations hearing on the fiscal year 2024 President's budget request for the Environmental Protection Agency. I want to welcome also Fiscal, EPA's Chief Financial Officer, who is joining the Administrator. Administrator Regan, climate chaos is here. We're seeing the impacts everywhere. The longer fire seasons, the more intensity of those fires, the decreased snowpacks, and the impact of that on our rivers and on our irrigation waters, the more severe weather events from the atmospheric rivers we've heard so much about on the West Coast this year, to warmer algae-infested lakes across the country, to droughts and record-shattering heat waves. Every part of the world is experiencing these impacts, and the damage is staggering and is going to increase exponentially unless we act decisively. I believe that to meet this moment, we have to accelerate our transition from fossil fuel energy to renewable energy. That we have to tackle that crisis both from the supply side of fossil fuels as well as from the demand side. This is why I adamantly oppose the Biden administration's approval of fossil fuel projects, one project after another. Not only does such approval slow the transition here in America, but it undermines our moral authority in the world. It's very hard to ask the rest of the world to transition off of coal or other fossil fuels to renewables when we're continuing to approve one fossil fuel project after another. The world needs American leadership, and to lead, we have to have the power of our example. While I believe that we're headed in the wrong direction in that regard, I do commend your agency for taking meaningful actions over the last several months. First, the cars and trucks emission rules are critical to decreasing our carbon footprint. The transportation sector is the largest source of carbon emissions in the United States, and that means we can't make meaningful progress without addressing those emissions. I'm a strong supporter of building and deploying more electric vehicles to reduce our greenhouse gases from transportation, and those proposed rules go a long way toward aggressively pushing our production in that direction. Recent press reports about EPA's plans for reducing power plant emissions also indicate a step in the right direction. Power plants, another major source of carbon pollution, and this latest rulemaking prioritizes the reduction of carbon emissions while promoting clean energy. In March, the Energy Information Administration forecasted that by the year 2050, wind and solar will account for 56% of electricity generation. Newly built gas plants will become stranded assets unless they have the most feasible new technology. The Inflation Reduction Act provided important incentives to clean up our power sector, and these rules leverage those new authorities and investments. These actions are commendable, common sense, and should be finalized as quickly as possible, which I'm sure you're thinking about every day. Today we are here to discuss the fiscal year 2024 budget request for EPA, which is $12.1 billion, a 19% increase from FY23. This funding level would make up much needed ground at EPA after the past decade of budget gaps and the 4 years that the Trump administration spent gutting the agency. The budget includes the $5 billion to support the work of reducing emissions, increasing resilience, and engaging other nations in this shared challenge. It builds upon the work we made to remedy environmental injustice. The work we have done together over the years, including a huge step up from just $11 million to $105 million in FY22, was an important effort to tackle historic disparities in the burden of pollution. And I'm impressed that the EPA budget request again prioritizes environmental justice by including an additional $267 million increase to tackle this challenge. And I'll look forward to understanding the ways that you would see these funds spent to achieve that goal. You've also highlighted in this request that the EPA is working with the Forest Service on prescribed burns and a particulate matter standard for exceptional events. And this is critical back home in my state of Oregon, where wildfires are growing hotter and more devastating year after year. On the wildfire front, and on that particulate matter piece, I mean, the key is that we have to be able to do the prescribed burns, which sometimes will violate standards, and I know fitting that into the overall framework is important. On the wildfire front, I was especially pleased to see the agency release its notice of funding opportunity for wildfire smoke grants, which will close in less than a week. After communities across my state and much of the West were blanketed in smoke for weeks that was caused by historic wildfires a few years ago, I created this program to support local efforts to prepare for and protect against wildfire smoke hazards. I'm looking forward to seeing some real results to provide relief from pervasive smoke that threatens businesses and public health. Even with the increases proposed in this budget, the EPA budget is still less than it needs to be, because there's even more that needs to be done, as I'm sure you're pondering. We are behind in rebuilding the agency's workforce. The FY24 staffing levels are still short of fiscal year 2009. We must make progress in hiring EPA's ecologists, hydrologists, toxicologists, and water infrastructure specialists who can meet the challenges we face with a changing climate, a chemical-based economy, and crumbling infrastructure. Finally, I look forward to talking more in depth about plastics. Just this year in East Palestine, Ohio, and in Richmond, Indiana, we had 2 horrific disasters that resulted in no small part from our addiction to plastics. And we're learning more and more about the problems plastics presents, both to human health and to damage to our ecosystems. And the fossil gas industry is seeking to use plastics as a way to expand their production, even as they are contributing enormously to climate chaos. So much more be done about plastic pollution, from wellhead to combustion to where it piles up. And I do appreciate your response to my April 5th letter about reports that the EPA has expedited the approval of chemicals that are produced through the pyrolysis of plastics. The articles written about that were very concerning. I appreciate your response, and if there's no objection, I'll enter into the record both my letter to you and your response. So entered without objection. I'm still concerned that the EPA is failing to protect frontline communities already overburdened with toxic chemicals and other forms of pollution when it comes to that process. The report by ProPublica and The Guardian shed light on a troubling approval process that EPA used for products from that so-called chemical recycling. While the April 21st strategy contains a testing requirement for new pyrolysis oils, a small step forward, the air pollution that may result from the new facilities may, in fact, increase the damage in already burdened communities. Similarly, approval of expanding a fossil fuel pipeline in my state is contrary to the steps that Oregon has taken to build a clean energy future. I hope and expect the EPA to work with the federal family, FERC in particular, to respect the wishes of Oregonians, as well as Californians and Washingtonians, to stop that process from moving forward. According to FERC's analysis, the GTN Express project would emit 2.3 million metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent emissions each year until at least 2052. Over the next 28 years, it will cause $9 billion in climate-related damage. And that's using a methodology that systematically minimizes the pipeline's climate impacts. Adding new emissions through pipeline expansions like the GTN Express is incompatible with President Biden's pledge, and it would undermine Oregon's efforts for a clean energy future. Now, I'm delighted that our ranking member is here, Lisa Murkowski, and we'll turn the microphone over to her.
Thank you.